I was really struggling mentally. I was drinking too much, was really in a bad place. I got let go. I got furloughed from that job, and I was left kind of broke, unemployed, uncertainty, having trouble finding a job. We all went through the pandemic. It sucked for a lot of people, and that's where I became an accidental entrepreneur. I started to see what Ben actually is, removed from family environment, removed from school, removed from corporate. Ben liked doing creative stuff, being entrepreneurial.
I always love hearing about successful people's step one because sometimes it feels like it only takes the tiniest effort to get the ball rolling. So thinking back, I'd love to know, what was your first step?
So I really think the first step was just,
Hey, Ben, what's up, man? Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Daniel, what's happening? Excited to be here.
Nothing much, man. Enjoying my Tuesday afternoon. So, one of the hardest parts about doing this kind of stuff is trying to figure out where to start. But fortunately, I think I have a good place to start with you. So to run it back a little bit, unfortunately, you, like many people during the pandemic, were laid off. So take me back to that moment. What was going through your mind back then?
Yeah, to set it up a little bit, like I was working in a corporate environment. I had just transferred to a new marketing firm. I'm a sales executive and I'm from Rochester, New York. The building I was working in Rochester is in almost every photo of the city. Beautiful building right in the heart of the city. I've got my suit and tie ready to go, ready to crush it. And if someone asked, I would have been like, hey, look where I work. Look what I'm doing. I'm crushing it. But to be honest with you, I was a little bit miserable. I'm not here to blast anybody, but me and the company, we weren't really aligned value-wise. And I was telling everybody I had made it, but I was really struggling mentally. I was drinking too much, was really in a bad place. And right when that happened, I had just started this brand new role. The pandemic hit.
Sure.
So last one in, first one out. I got let go. I got furloughed from that job, and I was left kind of broke, unemployed, uncertainty, having trouble finding a job. We all went through the pandemic. It sucked for a lot of people. And that's where I became an accidental entrepreneur, because that corporate Ben was actually kind of miserable. An entrepreneur Ben kind of accidentally fell into, well, I don't have a job. I'm a marketer with a laptop. Let's just consider starting a job for myself. And by now, I feel like I don't even know why I'm bringing it up. This was in 2020, and it looks like I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm here talking to you. So that's my story for now, and we're sticking to it.
2020 feels like it was 20 years ago, but
It's
crazy
crazy.
that the pandemic.
I feel like it was like freaking a year ago. Like I can't believe I've been an entrepreneur, self-employed for 4 years. It has flown by. I'm really passionate about what I get to do. And although it was forever ago, it was like, I don't know. It blows my mind I'm here.
It's one of those things that when you're having fun, unfortunately, time seems to move faster. So
It does.
one of those things. But I know you were thinking about, at the moment, you said you became an accidental entrepreneur. But before that, you talked about like you were in kind of a funk. Reading up about you and just learning more about your background, do you think that part of that funk or part of the challenge, like in your mindset of trying to figure it out, came from having a rough upbringing or like a challenging childhood?
Definitely. A lot of my life, I've been trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And I don't know how deep you want to go into childhood, but
As deep as you can, man. It's your platform. Feel free to say whatever.
well, and it's your show, so I'll go a little brief, and you can kind of pick out whatever you think would be best to talk about. But the simple version is my dad did have a bit of a drug addiction. I can't remember a time when he wasn't drinking alcohol, smoking weed, cocaine. I don't know what else he was doing, but he had a little bit of an addiction with a few different substances simultaneous. And for what it's worth, nicest man in the world, but was really struggling. And simultaneously, my mom had a neurological disorder, multiple sclerosis. So she was physically and mentally degenerating at a little quicker pace than a lot of people. And Ben was the shortest boy in school, but wanted to be a basketball player, was obsessed with Michael Jordan, then Vince Carter. and had great skills, but was short and shy and got picked on and bullied. So I never really fit in at a very young age. And I think a lot of what I did with, at the time, friend groups, then getting into drinking myself, trying to fit in with the quote unquote cool kids, starting to party. I was just putting a square peg in a round hole a lot of the time because I hadn't found community. I was a creative type. I didn't know a lot of creatives. I was an entrepreneurial type. I liked starting stuff, but I was working in corporate environments. I was just square pegging, round holing it the entire time. And it really wasn't until I found the music industry, found love there, also found a lot of partying there and did a lot of damage there as well, but then found other personal growth driven people, other business minded people, other creative types, other entrepreneurs. And it wasn't always in my friend group. It was in podcasts, it was in books, it was on YouTube that I started to see what Ben actually is, removed from family environment, removed from school, removed from corporate. Ben likes doing creative stuff, being entrepreneurial, and talking about what's kind of boring, like marketing and sales and personal growth. This is boring for a lot of people, but I love this shit. And once I started to align and get clarity on what was interesting to me, I was able to find people that also had those interests. And things have been better ever since. I'm growing each day, I'm learning each day. That's why I like podcasts like yours. It gives entrepreneurs an opportunity to learn something new today because none of us are alone. Even if our family or friends aren't like us, we can find people that are.
I was gonna say Nate Robinson won the dunk contest, so sometimes
I wasn't that good though, bro. I wasn't that good.
it's okay. Maybe one day we'll see Ben dunking, but awesome that you were able to kind of find your group and really get involved in the media space and marketing space and help a lot of people out, especially promoting a lot of those local media heads and that creative kind of stuff. Thinking back to when you first started entrepreneurship, there are a lot of crazy stories out there about successful people. And I always love hearing about successful people's step one because sometimes it feels like it only takes the tiniest effort to get the ball rolling. So thinking back, I'd love to know, what was your first step?
Yeah, it's hard to determine the first step because I'm a firm believer, literally from a young age, our experiences, our skills, our interests, they all prepare us for who we're going to become later. And what could have been a traumatic experience might end up being like a great lesson to make you a better person later on. So there's all sorts of stuff that happened that we don't like. When I was a young kid, I was an advocate for first basketball, had a jersey for every single day of the week. Then when I found music, I became a music marketer without knowing what marketing was. So my friends were in bands. I would hand out flyers. I would wear their t-shirt. I would run the merch table. Way back, I was setting up MySpace pages. Then I was setting up Facebook pages. I didn't know what marketing was per se. I just was promoting things that I loved. This was stage zero because I didn't know I was making steps towards podcasting or marketing or entrepreneurship. I just knew my buddy Dan, which is funny because my brother's name's Dan and he was in a band. So my brother
Mhm.
Dan literally is in a band. I'm going to talk about his band, Kids with a Z, to my friends and bring them to the shows. So I really think the first step was just doing something I was interested in and passionate about. And it led me down the path of starting a music podcast. The music industry got shut down during COVID and I was unemployed. That led me from going from music Ben to business Ben and starting a business podcast. So all I did is things that I loved with people that I loved that on topics I was interested in, but it allowed me to develop skills that I didn't realize that my music background with audio engineering and a music podcast in 2016 and marketing from a young age and working for a marketing company all led me to starting a marketing firm and a podcast agency during the pandemic. But step zero was not even knowing I was making steps in that direction. So what I encourage people to do is it's not true that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Shit gets difficult. A lot of stuff's hard. But if you start doing things you're interested in, you're 1,000,000% going to develop skill sets that you'll use later in your life. So go out, do things that are fun, develop skills, and then when you start something new, you've already got the tools. You're not starting from zero. You're already way farther than you think you are. And that was my experience.
You know, what's funny, one of the things that you just mentioned, something that I think about a lot frequently, do you think that most entrepreneurs have to be passionate about what they're building in order to be successful?
We have to define success. Do you want to define
So,
success?
so sure, no, that's fine. I mean, success is open to interpretation, so
Yeah.
that's a fair question. You know, say if I'll say success is like a definite goal differing by entrepreneur. So say if like an entrepreneur has a goal of like 10 million or 50 million, whatever financial security is in those eyes. So I know that's also gray area and everyone has a different number in their head, but let's just assume success means financial security for that entrepreneur. Do you think that an entrepreneur has to be really passionate about the goal, about what they're building in order to get financial security and have business success?
Not at all. Based on that definition, not at all. I think it's scammy. I think it's unethical, but there's people that build ads. I don't know if anyone's ever went to like NFLBite.com or a place where you can stream live sports or music or TV. There's these tiny little X's. And if you click the X in the wrong spot, it opens up an ad. Someone's creating this software that's spamming people with ads, and they're making millions of dollars building this technology. I don't think it's ethical. I don't think it's enjoyable. I think it's a pain in the butt. They're probably not passionate about little X's that you click in the wrong spot and it sends someone an ad. People aren't always passionate about what they do. You can make tens of millions of dollars doing something you have zero passion about. You might like the creativity, you might like building the business, but it might not be something you breathe when you're like, you might just be a job for you that you make a lot of money at. That being said, if we look at success in a fulfillment level, there's a possibility that you can make a lot of money and still not be happy. So, yes, you can make a ton of money just working hard. You identify a need, you identify a problem, you fill that problem, that need with a solution, and you do a better job marketing that solution and building products than your competitor. You have a fantastic business. I don't know if there's longevity there because I haven't built a $50 million business,
Not
but
yet.
I'd rather. Well, here's the thing, brother. I don't need a $50 million business.
Yeah,
Like a
fair.
$1 million business is fine with me. I don't have a team of 500 employees, but
Mhm.
maybe I will build one bigger. Maybe I'm thinking small. But my point is, it's more nuance. If money's the only metric, I would podcast less. I'd probably in a completely different industry if I wanted to be rich as hell. But I couple what I love, what the world needs, what in the middle is what you do. What you love, what the world needs. If you look at a Venn diagram, you on one end, world needs on the other end. What I do is in the middle. But if you've got a good enough product service, you don't even have to enjoy yourself and you can make freaking crazy money. So
For sure. I
depends on
think
what you're looking to do.
definitely. I think what you were just describing. So for those that aren't as familiar, it's something called an ikigai, which is essentially, you know, something you're good at, something society needs, and like something you can get paid for. So it's a really cool Japanese figure. But do you think maybe a better summary is when there's more to it than just money, there's a bigger likelihood of longevity and you staying in it for the long run?
Yeah, 100%. There's actually a better likelihood of you living longer, which no one talks about. But if you're stressed, your cortisol's through the roof. If you don't like what you do, if you're in an unethical industry, there's a higher probability you're going to have poor health and die sooner. So I'd rather make less money and live 20 years than make a ton of money and have a heart attack at 55. Not
I
saying
think
anyone will, but there's so much more longevity and fulfillment doing something that you enjoy. But again, the ikigai, if you can find that balance, then you're in that money spot.
You know what's interesting? A lot of people who are in corporate America want to make that transition from employee to entrepreneur. And I know you were kind of forced into that situation with the pandemic. So, from your perspective, what was the hardest part about transitioning from employee to entrepreneur?
I did not have a personal brand. Um, you might never want to become an entrepreneur. You're probably listening to this podcast because you are, but if you're in corporate right now, that's even better because you have guaranteed income, I'm assuming. If you have a salary, if you have consistent income, that's badass. I didn't have a personal brand. You can start building a personal brand while you build your side hustle. Because two things happen. One, if you build a personal brand, if people in the company know about you, if they see what you're doing online, they're going to want to promote you and give you more money because you're valuable to the company because you have a strong brand on whether it's LinkedIn's great, but even Instagram, Facebook, people know you, they buy from you. The company's going to move you up. Other companies are going to want to poach you. So if you're unhappy with your role, you can go somewhere else. And if you're an entrepreneur or you're building a side hustle, the moment you launch, you have a new product, you have even a small email list, you have 500 followers, but 100 of them are very engaged. You can make an ask, you can make an offer, you can put out a piece of content. And if you have a personal brand, if you've already developed the cliche, know, like, and trust, which is so cliche, but literally true, people know you, like you, and trust you. You can put out a piece of content, an offer, make an ask, and people are going to say yes because you have a personal brand. I had zero online brand. For what it's worth, I was actually the music party animal in Rochester, New York. I had a music blog. Everybody in the music scene knew who I was. And in my opinion, I kind of had a bad reputation because I was just all over the place. Like I didn't have the best brand. So when I rebranded myself from Music Ben to Business Ben, stopped talking music and started talking business and entrepreneurship, I was able to develop a brand as a connector, as a curious person, as a helper, making introductions, adding value, showing up on time, over delivering. If you over deliver and if you create a good know, like, and trust impression, you'll get more sales, you'll move up in the company, you'll grow quicker as an entrepreneur. And the earlier you start, the better, because branding's not something that you just flip a switch and then you have a strong one overnight. It's something that is developed and tested over time. So when I say brand, it's just your reputation. There's two aspects. It's what you want people to think about you and what other people actually think about you. What do you want them to think and what do they say when you're not in the room? You can control some of what you want them to think, but they're going to develop opinions of you regardless. Do they show up on time? Do they do good work? Are they values driven? And if you can develop a personal brand intentionally, you can create, like I said, momentum, kind of do anything in this world. And the beauty with AI and technology is everything's replaceable but your brand because no one can just replace your personality entirely. I can use an AI thing to write a blog for me, but I'm the one who's going to sell that blog. I'm the one who's going to be that leader. If we want a $50 million business, we need employees. We want to build a brand that can make people want to come work with us. So branding's everything, man. I hope that made sense.
So, but no, it did. So it sounds like, whenever someone needs a product or service, you have to be known as the person to deliver that because, when someone thinks of, and this is, I think, is a great example, when someone thinks of Nike or when someone thinks of like running sneakers, the gap between, someone mentioning running sneakers and you thinking of Nike, the shorter the gap is between those thoughts, the better your brand. So I think the whole idea is just become known as like the elite person to do that product or service.
Dude, when someone thinks Dave Ramsey, they think of money and debt. When they think of Brene Brown, they think of shame and resilience. When they think of Ben, I want them to think of connection and growth. Like if we can whittle down our brand to 1 to 3 values and just hammer those values in everything we do, everything we post. Like if I do things that disconnect, if I'm not growing, I'm misaligned with my brand. So I tell people, write down one word at most 3, and have that be the DNA of everything you do. And then you'll attract people like you, and you'll, like a magnet, push away people that aren't like you. That's quite all right.
Yep, for sure. I think one of the things that Jeff Bezos said, and I think when he was on Lex Friedman's podcast way back when, is that most people are social seeking. So it's just human nature to kind of only or to do things that attract the most possible people. And it's more of a fact seeking mentality to kind of do the one thing that you're very good at. So it's almost like you have to go against your human nature to really achieve something. It's just a fascinating thought that I had.
I love it.
So I think we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but there's a big paradigm shift happening right now, especially in sales, where a lot of people are ditching traditional selling for social selling. So from someone that helps other people sell for a living, what does social selling mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. Like, you just add more value than you ask for, and then you become a no-brainer. Most of my sales are permission-based. I'm a marketer by trade, but one could argue that I'm a shitty marketer
Sure.
because I don't have 10,000 leads a week. I don't promise 1,000 leads a day. I actually don't have that many leads, Daniel, to be honest, but I sell high-ticket product, and most of my business comes from my reputation and literally just conversation. No one wants to be hard. Maybe I hard close you on a $97 course because I know you have a sticking point. And if you don't pull that credit card and take that course, you might always have that sticking point. It's usually not the case. I sell relatively expensive investment services. Like, it's not like just 97 bucks to work with me. So you build a relationship, you create content, and you add a ridiculous amount of value. So to give you an example, and I could do examples all day, but I'll just speak from what I do for simple and clarity. I put out a podcast, which is entirely free. I have a monthly networking event, which is entirely free. I have a weekly exclusive mastermind, which is very, very affordable. And it doesn't matter what someone asks me. I'm not going to clock in like an attorney. If someone has a question, I will give them an answer as if they paid me as much money as I've ever asked for to answer that question. I give. I give lots of introductions. I comment on lots of posts. I react to lots of posts. My thought is, if I give 100 times and I get 20 hand raises, those 20 hand raises is far more than enough. And some people think, well, I didn't have to give it all, and I got 2 hand raises. Give 0, gain 2. I'm a winner. My thought is, give 100, gain 20. You get a lot more inbound. You have a better reputation. And when you talk about social selling, I'm really talking the mindset here, because when someone DMs me, I'm never trying to sell them. I'm either inviting them to a free event, inviting them to check out my podcast, introducing them to someone else, asking if they have any questions and answering them. So I give, 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 give. Gary Vee has a book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. It's more jab, 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 hug. And then they want to freaking work with me just because of that. So I think a lot of sales is very traditional. It's very aggressive. It's very me, me, me. I try to treat my strategy them, them, them. And then they want to work with me if they're not a jerk. And I don't want to work with jerks anyway, so it works out.
I like the analogy that you just made there, but one of the things that you talked about was your podcast and a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff that you put out there. And podcasting is really interesting because it's one of those things that takes a really long time to get great at. And you actually host 6 different shows, which I think it shows it's safe to say that you know more than you did on day one or when you started. Thinking back, is there anything that you wish you knew on day one that would have really accelerated your progress to where you are right now?
I think I thought I would be better than I was. I think I thought it was easier than it was. I thought I was more interesting than I am. I thought I was a better editor than I am. I thought I had a stronger network than I did. This was 2016, and I was just this music guy starting a music podcast because I like to go to shows. People loved the show, because it was relevant. It was the Rochester music scene. People loved it, but it wasn't fantastic. It wasn't anything that I could sell as a service. Now I do production for a lot of podcasts. I do marketing for a lot of thought leaders, and it got better. But I also started in 2016. So I think I had a unreasonable confidence in myself because I sucked. And most people are going to suck on day one. So it requires humility not to quit, not to get frustrated, to keep going when you don't see results. Because most people fail simply because they didn't outlast. The difference between a winner and a loser on a long time horizon, because some people start a business, they do great for 5 years, burn out and lose. The people that do great for 10 years, they outlast, they learn. So that's the biggest thing I wish I knew is you're going to be worse than you expect. Some people already think they're going to stink. They might even be better, but most of us just really stink. You might stink, but it's going to get better, and you just have to simply outlast.
There's this famous statistic out there that 90% of businesses fail in the first year.
Wow.
But if you look behind the scenes of those numbers, do you think that most people just give up before they get to that rapid growth?
100%. And there's some statistic that X amount of marriages end in divorce, like 50 something percent. I don't know how many of those people are getting married 2, 3, 4 times. Maybe business owners start 2, 3, 4, 5 businesses. Like, I don't know the exact stats, but I know that someone who starts something and doesn't get I have it, but ADHD, shiny object, ideation, serial entrepreneur, freaking like, you end up failing at everything because you're not doing any of them great. So if you can get really good, you already said this, get really good at doing one thing, you will be able to outlast. And it might not always be sexy. It might not always be new. It might get boring, but that's what's required to build something worth building. Having some boring days, turning off the light when a shiny object comes your way. I see shiny objects, I still kind of turns them, but I try to like turn the light off so I'm at least a little less distracted than before.
Yep. That's just but that's the thing is that's just human behavior. Like it's just,
Yeah.
It's natural to like want to consume. So it's tough, but a lot of it is conditioning, I'd add. And I definitely feel a lot of what you're saying. But you've mentioned that you're doing a lot of this work in like podcasting, and you've definitely made a lot of progress since the pandemic. But is there anything that you're still trying to get better at?
I'm trying to get back. Literally everything we've talked about today. We've mentioned podcasting, we've mentioned community growth, we've mentioned skills, marketing, sales. None of these things, I'm not a guru at any of them. Oh my, am I killing my credibility? I don't care. I think there's no end destination. It's a constant evolution. There is no final destination. We're evolving. And I firmly believe you're either growing or you're beginning to wither. So everything we've talked about, I'm working on. My community is not big enough. My podcast doesn't have as many listeners. I'm not impacting as many people as I'd like. And the products and services I've sell work, but they could be better. So I'm working on all this stuff every single day. We can talk about one individual one if you want, but
Go
not a
ahead.
day goes by that I don't try to get better.
All right, fair enough. So I know that you've had some legendary guests on your podcast, and it's a great show. So obviously we
Thank you.
can all improve, but keep killing it, Ben, for sure. But
Thank you.
one of the guys that you got a chance to speak to is Alex Sanfilippo, who runs a dope platform called Podmatch.
Yeah.
And you actually got a chance to pick his brain for an hour. I'd love to know, what's the number one piece of advice he gives you about what it takes to run a successful podcast?
Oof. So Alex has been on twice. The first time we talked about podcasting and branding. The second time we actually created a podcast basically by scratch on the spot, having fun. And one thing he did, because I let him take the lead, I'm a creative guy. I come up with ideas. The first thing he did is he went to Google Trends. He started searching on what people were actually looking for. So Alex and I, on the spot, just for fun, created this podcast that was fit after 40, something about fit at any age, how to stay fit after 40. because we determined through some research that middle-aged men, and it was specifically for men, middle-aged men are looking for ways to stay fit. So Ben usually just comes up with an idea on this just randomly because he rolls out of bed and goes, "What a great idea," or does things he loves. Alex slowed me down to be like, what does your audience need? Where is there a hole in the market? There are things, we talk about this, you mentioned Ikigai. There's things we're passionate about, but we also need to make sure that there's opportunity within that passion. So that was a big thing that he made obvious when we did research on the spot. Sometimes you need to plan your attack before you attack your plan. So plan your attack before you attack your plan.
That's great advice there. You've also had a chance to sit down with Chris Du, who's a
Yeah.
legendary personal branding expert. I'm just curious, what was his number one piece of personal branding advice?
See, there's so many from these guys. They're brilliant people. I don't know if this was his number one piece of branding advice, but an example he brought up comes to mind. When you go into these super high-end luxury stores, when you go into a Gucci, when you go into a Rolex, when you go into a fashion brand, when you go into a nice car brand like a Lamborghini, I could be wrong. I don't go into these places all the time myself. I'm more humble. I don't buy expensive stuff. That's okay. Someone can tell me if I'm wrong. People don't shark at you with traditional, loud, aggressive sales tactics. What they do is they create an environment. When you go into a nice shoe store or a watch store, everything's spread out. It doesn't look like an outlet warehouse with everything you can imagine. It's simple, it's spread out, and there's always someone there to help you, but they're not trying to hard sell you on anything. A lot of us forget the power of creating that environment, creating an environment where people are empowered to buy, because they wouldn't be there if they weren't considering spending money with you. But the moment you get aggressive, or the moment you assume Dan's there to buy a watch for himself, but what I don't realize is he's buying a woman's watch for his girlfriend, or he's buying a starter watch for his child. The moment I don't take the patience to ask insightful questions, be a guide rather than a salesperson, I'm going to lose the sale if I try to sell Dan something, but he's buying it for his child. So these luxury brands, these people that can charge as much as they want for product that isn't always as good, but they can charge as much as they want because they create a environment. So if you can create that environment, it's going to be so much easier to get great clients that want to work with you.
So a lot of those high ticket luxury brands is not assuming something about the customer right away, but more or less letting them come to you. And then once you know their priorities and their needs, slowly meeting those needs through, we'll call it social selling.
It's a good way to put it. I call it permission based. Like it's, hey, if you want to buy a watch, I'm here. If not, take a look at these because they're fun. But they're not worried about closing you. I don't know. I could be wrong. If someone tries to close me, I'm usually irritated and I leave. It's about creating an environment.
So I was also listening to your episode with James Altucher, who also has a really incredible story. And he spoke about how he went from having over $15 million after an exit to just under $20 in his bank account. So from the conversation that you had with him, what did you learn about how he was able to flip the script?
He takes a lot of risks. I don't know how much he talks about this, but if you look at his story and if you look at the conversation, he makes a lot of predictions. He takes a lot of risks, and he's not always correct. But he takes $1 million risks. When most people, including myself, I take small risks and I get small results. He takes really big risks and gets really big results. So when he takes a brand, a business worth tens of millions, loses it all, ends up homeless for a moment and rebuilds it, I guess there's two things. Yes, he takes heavy risk, but he's also a freaking genius. he is a highly skilled individual, and his skills and his intelligence allows him to do it again. Because anybody can take a risk and get lucky. If you take a risk, fail, really it comes down to how skilled are you, or to do it again, to try it again. So take risks, but don't take dumb ones. He is really skilled and really smart, and no one can replace that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how he does it, honestly. He is an interesting guy. James Altucher is one of the most interesting guy I've ever met. I don't even know what he's doing. His brain just works differently. It's pretty cool.
I'd love to play him in chess sometime, but because
Oh my God.
fun side note, he happens to be a mat, like I think a national master as well, which is also crazy and to think about in addition to everything else that he's doing. But do you think that it takes like a healthy level of chutzpah to be able to keep going even after going through such a catastrophic failure?
Define chutzpah, because I like that word.
Chutzpah is like the gumption almost to stand out among the crowd. And I think that's the best way out at it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's required because there's a lot of financial advisors, for example, a lot of real estate agents, a lot of insurance people that, in my opinion, are kind of boring. But the best of the best aren't boring. I'd rather be different than slightly better. I'd rather you be better than me, you be smarter than me, you have better services than me, but I'm different. I have chutzpah. I have a uniqueness. People are going to hire me instead of you, even if you're better. Now, what if I can be better than you and different? So yeah, I'd rather be different than just better. And I think it does take a little bit of chutzpah to commit to being different than everybody else.
I love that word too.
It's a good
Yep.
one.
Yep. Like I said earlier, you happen to host 6 different shows, which still boggles my mind, but you've got a chance to talk to some of the best business minds out there. And on that note, do you still have a dream guest that you haven't had a chance to speak to, but you'd love to have on?
I feel like I have a lot of dream guests. My biggest dream guests are like Jesus Christ, Gandhi, all the ones that are impossible. I'd love to have Oprah on. I'd love to jump on the Taylor Swift bandwagon and have her on because I know that'll 50x my downloads.
Mhm.
Friend of mine who's never been on is Brad Lee. Love to have him on. Nick Sananastaso is a brilliant story. Would love to have him on. Then obviously the obvious stuff, Bezos, Musk. Lex Friedman has everybody on that you can imagine. I don't even know how. I could just go all day, but there's a lot of people I would love to have on the show. I think Oprah would be cool. I don't think she does podcasts, but who knows, man? We can dream one day.
And who knows, she might be listening. Is there anything that you'd love to ask Oprah in case that she is?
I feel like she's already been asked this before, but I'd really like to get into the amount of like difficulty and trauma and people judging her. Like she's an African American woman. She comes from a poor family. She comes from a bit of an abusive life. I don't know if you can answer this in a question. It's like the Mother Teresa effect or the Oprah effect. Some people just have an energy, a confidence, a resilience that's hard to actually explain, but I want to get around it because I think surrounding yourself with good people through osmosis makes you better. And she's one of those people that I'm sure she could give me a cliche answer as to why she's resilient, but truly something in her is magical. And I just want to be around people that have that extra, they have that X factor. So many people have it, but that X factor is so important. And I don't know what it is or how to replicate it, but I want some of that.
So it takes a lot of chutzpah to tell everyone you get a car and you get a car and you get a car. So
That's good marketing.
for
That's
sure,
good.
yeah, definitely. I forgot. I think it was, what was the company again? It was like these tiny red cars. It's like the brand is eluding me, but it was sure great marketing for them as well.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to take a bit of a risk here. I love doing the podcast. I love asking questions, but like one of the biggest things I struggle with right now, in addition to growing the show, is bringing on sponsors for the show. So hypothetically, if you just met me, imagine we haven't been speaking for the last hour. What would your number one piece of advice be for someone like me who's trying to bring partners on for the show?
I get crystal clear on who your audience is and what they want. I'm happy to make this intro, or people can Google him, but Justin Moore of Creator Wizard, he was on my podcast. You don't have to listen to that. You can just go to his YouTube channel. He helps people find sponsors, but it all comes down to, what does your audience want, need, desire? You can actually run surveys, poll, determine what they're actually looking for. And it doesn't have to be 100,000 listeners. But if I have a friend, Harry Duran, he started Vertical Farming Podcast. And there wasn't really any vertical farming podcast. And he had over $10,000 in sponsors before episode 1 because he had such clarity on who his audience was and what it was about, that these businesses that did trade shows were willing to sponsor his podcast for a season because it cost less for a season of vertical farming podcast than one trade show. So who's your audience? What do they want? What do they desire? You can even make it up if you're starting from phase 0. And then when you go to the sponsor, you don't go, I think I have some ideas. You don't go to them asking them for ideas. You speak like a marketer. You speak like someone who's clear. You say, I have this audience that's interested in this. Person A, B, and C have already asked me, and they've signed up because I don't have an affiliate code. They just signed up because I told them to use your product. Would you be open to sponsoring a season so you can ultimately help and inspire more of my audience people of blank? So I have this issue with Real Business Connections. You might have this problem. My audience is actually a little bit too broad. So if you actually you sharpen the saw a little bit and you get a little bit of a more narrow audience, it'll be easier to pitch. But basically, just figure out what your audience wants, find someone that offers that, and then present it in a simple, concise way. And who knows? You might knock it out of the park. They might say no, but even if it takes 10 no's to get to a yes, you might as well go out and try it with 11 people.
I appreciate the advice. Definitely something that I'll look to do. So here's where I want to end off. A lot of people out there right now, especially with the economy, are struggling financially, emotionally, physically. From someone that's made that comeback, what's your number one piece of advice for them?
Kind of already talked about this. Long time horizons. There is a possibility that someone listening today is 88. That's pretty old. I'm impressed. There's also a possibility someone's listening and they're only 13, 18, 22, 28. How far from 88 are you if you're 28? You're 60 years. Nobody lives a long life without seeing a recession. Nobody lives a long life without their income going down, or their assets going down, or they make a financial mistake, or they get a divorce and lose money. We all go through that stuff. Long time horizon. This shall pass. Be positive, be resilient. If you're struggling, seek people that are successful, get their advice. But again, just look at the long term and don't be such a baby about it. Now, it's okay to struggle. When I struggle, I talk to people about it. But don't be a victim, because give it another year, give it another 2 years, give it another 5, 10, 20 years. I'm almost guaranteed what you're trying to accomplish will get done. Just might not happen today. And that's just the reality of it all.
I think that's a beautiful way to end it off. And Ben, thanks for coming on the podcast, brother, and talking about your story and giving a lot of great advice.
Thanks for having me. It was fun. Appreciate it.
What's up, Business Blumin Squad? Thanks for listening to today's episode. I'm excited to say that the podcast is growing across all platforms, but I'm on a mission to make Businesses Blumin the world's #1 entrepreneurship podcast, and I need your help to get there. So if you've enjoyed the conversations and learned anything valuable from the content, then please subscribe to the podcast. Subscribing helps me immensely and lets me reinvest in the show to make things even bigger and better for you. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.